You know, growing carnivorous plants, we tend to overlook the simple stuff, the little nuances that keep your plants growing and thriving. And honestly, this can be some of the hardest things to find when you're a new grower and you're finding out just how to take care of these plants. And so, what am I beating around the bush about? I'm talking about watering and I'm talking about potting. And so, today I'm going to go over potting, which is how to pot it, and then also what soil to use. And then I'm going to go over watering and what that looks like. All that and more coming your way in just a moment. Now, right out of the gate, we're going to look at Venus flytraps. Venus flytraps tend to have the biggest misnomer about them as being fragile. And a lot of new growers see these plants as exotic, and therefore exotic must mean fragile. And this actually couldn't be further from the truth. These are very tough plants, and not just Venus flytraps. Most carnivorous plants are very tough. Think about why they're carnivorous. They've had to be tough. They've had to overcome, adapt, and evolve in order to survive in a very extreme way. And so why am I telling you this? When it comes to repotting any carnivorous plant, but especially Venus flytraps, the idea is you don't have to be super ginger with them. Certainly you don't want to wreck them, but the main thing to keep in consideration is when you repot them is these few pointers. One, almost every temperate carnivorous plant, most plants in general, have a crown, and that crown is that little section there in the center. Now, this is probably the most important thing when you're considering repotting a Venus flytrap, is you want to make sure that that crown, that little area there, is above the soil surface. Let's see if I can get a side angle here. Now you'll see under the ground here that there is going to be a rhizome, a pseudo-rhizome called a corm, and that's the thing that you want in the soil. Venus flytraps tend to have very long, very black, fragile roots, and so you want to do your best when you're taking them off to not damage those roots. Now that sounds scary, but they're a lot tougher than you think. And if you're thinking, well, you just started off this video saying they're tough, and now you're telling me they're fragile roots, they're going to be okay. As a matter of fact, the rhizomes can even grow without roots, and they'll grow new ones, but do your best when you're unpotting them to not damage the roots. Now, normally I would unpot one of these and show you, but this is actually not the time to repot these. You're going to want to repot these when they're dormant or just coming out of dormancy at the very latest, depending on when you live, middle March. But the idea is simple. With Venus flytraps, you're going to want to give them a very tall pot. Wideness isn't necessarily as big of an issue until they get larger. You're going to want a very tall pot, and that is because they're used to growing very long roots that like to dip down and find the water level. And so the biggest thing to take away is you're going to plant that little potato-looking rhizome under the soil up to the point where you see this little crown here. Now, I will say, it's not that big of a deal. If you are having them outside where there's open airflow, the chances of them getting crown rot are extremely low. You got to think about these plants in the wild and how they have been able to handle. It's not perfect there, right? They're getting covered by pine needles, they're getting covered by dirt, heavy storms, and so they will be fine if they're not completely perfect at the soil line. And the other thing that I want to point out is Venus flytraps grow in one direction. And when you have it unpotted, you'll see where that rhizome has the live side on it. But here's the thing, don't get carried away with this. When you just repot it or uppot it, make sure that you pot it in the middle so that it has room to grow. If you pot it up against the side and it's the growing side that's faced the side of the pot, then it's going to slow it down a bit. Now let's talk about watering for this one before we go to the next plants. Venus flytraps, people say, don't water over top, don't water over top. Think about these plants and all other plants we're going to cover today as they are in the wild. They are certainly getting rained on. The reason why people tell you not to water at the top is because they want to prevent crown rot. But if you have them under good lighting and good airflow, or even better, growing outdoors, you're not going to have to worry about that. You can water these over top if you want. Now, if you are wanting to stay away from that, just water on the edges of the pot and you'll be just fine. Or the option that I do, and a lot of people do, is have them in standing water. Now, you remember I told you that they like to dig their roots down deep. And so you want them tall pots, and you don't need them sitting in as deep of water. So water maybe just a couple inches deep will be just fine. And I tend to let them kind of dry out in the trays for a day, but make sure the soil stays moist. As far as the soil, you're going to use a 50-50 peat and perlite. You want to make sure that it is a soil that is inert. And I also sometimes top dress it with sphagnum moss, and that helps protect any soil erosion when it is raining. But that is that for Venus flytraps. It is that simple. As long as you're giving them good airflow, good circulation, there isn't a lot to be worried about with them. Tall pots, height is important. And as far as watering, if it rains, I've even seen these things live submerged, but you want to make sure that you keep the water level at least decent, about 2 inches. If it's get a little higher than that and they've got plenty of sunlight and airflow, they'll be just fine. So let's move on to the next. So let's next talk about the drossers or the sundews. Now you'll see in here that they've got a little tiny, see that right there? A little crown. You can see it better here. That's actually called a hibernacula. Now, you want to try to keep that above the soil surface, but I want to tell you, of all the plants we're going to cover today, these are the least to worry about. By the way, I might have to stop the video here and there because I have an air show going on over my head, but these will do well in just about anything you put them on. 100% peat, 100% sphagnum moss. I do a 50-50. They just do fine. As far as watering, I keep them water levels all the way up to the top and sometimes even above the crowns to absolutely nothing as long as the soil is moist, and they do just fine. I cannot stress enough how bulletproof these plants really are. When you pot them in the middle of your pot. That way you have plenty of room for them to spread. These will spread very quickly, and so give them the space to do so. I'm actually going to show you in a minute what I've done to some for even more rapid growth. So let me pause the video and take you over there. Here I've actually planted these beautiful filiformis and bonata in just a giant kiddie pool of peat and perlite. And that's just to give them the opportunity to spread their roots as quickly as possible. These things will grow like wildfire. And so within no time, probably by the end of the year, this thing will be completely full. Now you see, I've done my best to try to keep it above the soil line, but again, it's not going to matter. These things will push through the soil. So here I went over top of it, doesn't matter. It will push through and it will find that light. So don't be too nervous about making sure that everything is perfect. These plants are warriors. These plants are tough. They're meant to evolve and survive, and so they will find a way to push through here. As far as watering goes, again, just use a water that has a lower parts per million. Now with these, they can take quite a bit higher parts per million, even over 150, and do just fine. Top water them, bottom water them, whatever, they don't care. They love all of it. These plants are bulletproof. I cannot stress that enough. Now let's talk about Sarracenia. When it comes to potting Sarracenia, there's only one thing to really keep in mind, and that is Sarracenia do not want their rhizome covered. See that crown there? You'll be able to notice pretty quickly the rhizome on a Sarracenia. Excuse me, they want the rhizome covered, not the crown. My apologies. So that's the crown. That's where the growth happens, right? They are susceptible to crown rot, even if you have them wide out in the open. And so you want to make sure you see those active growing points sticking out. If I can get it to focus, here's a great example of that crown sticking out. See if I can get it to focus. See how the growth point is out of the soil? That is what you want, and it'll continue to grow across the ground, whereas the majority of the bottom of the rhizome and the roots are under the soil. Now, as far as pot size, let's see if I can show you what I'm having to contend with making this video. Watch this jet. So this is an air show. They bank right over my house. Watch this jet. gonna curl around. Watch him, he's about to blast right past our house. Ready? Isn't that crazy? Now, as far as pot size, the bigger the pot size you can give them, the better. But they don't need huge pots, and it will take several seasons for them to get from this size to full size. But if you want to keep them in the same soil, give them a good size pot. They have very shallow roots that sort of spread out. They have a lot of roots, but they tend to spread out to the left and right and not so much down. So they don't require as deep pots as like a Venus flytrap. Let's see if I can find you another example of that crown, just to give you the best I can here. You see how that crown is sticking out of the ground, but the rest of the bottom of the rhizomes under the soil. All right, now let's talk about, as far as water, you can have them in very deep water, all the way up to basically pot level, but usually they're good in about a couple inches of water, but they are way forgiving when it comes to high water levels, and they'll do just fine as long as they're out in the open and getting that airflow and sunlight. Now, let's talk about Sarracenia and Purpurea. These take the same amount of care as everything else, but with one exception. They are two exceptions. They like very high water levels, especially Sarracenia, and Purpurea wants water in the pitcher themselves. You'll see here, these have a lid that covers them from the rain. And the reason why it does that is that there is an enzyme in the bottom of this pitcher that breaks down the prey, and rain dilutes the potency of that enzyme. Whereas Purpurea has evolved to have an amoeba help them digest their prey. So they have to have water in there. So with these, keep the water level high and water inside the pitchers. With these also, you're going to want to use peat and perlite to keep the soil fresh. And again, you are going to want to keep that crown above the soil line. Let me just show you what I'm dealing with. If I can get here, look at these. Little paws. Anyways, making a video in the middle of an air show. So make sure that you keep the crown above the soil line, but you can fill them up as high as you want with water. The Sarracenia actually in the wild grows almost completely submerged, sometimes completely submerged, and these pitchers will actually dip down in the water where fish will crawl in there or swim in there and can't get out. But the biggest difference here is Purpurea wants to be top watered, so that way you can get some in their pitchers. Now these aren't going to hurt you or hurt them if they get top water. Those lids will protect them.